The rain in Blackwood Lane never just fell, it wept. It scratched against the tall, arched windows of the Miller estate like the fingernails of something desperate to get inside. Liam stood in the center of the grand foyer, his suitcase clutched in a white-knuckled grip, wondering if the heavy, suffocating air inside the house was worse than the storm outside. He had inherited the property from his estranged uncle Arthur, a man who lived and died alone, surrounded by nothing but hundreds of ticking clocks and an infamous reputation for absolute eccentricity. Liam needed a place to escape the noise of the city, a sanctuary to finish his novel. He thought he had found it. He was tragically wrong. As the heavy oak door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoed through the cavernous house, followed immediately by an unsettling, profound silence. It wasn't a normal quietness. It felt heavy, almost physical, like a thick blanket pressing down on his eardrums. Liam shook his head. Liam woke up with a jolt. The digital clock on his phone read 3:15 a.m. The room was freezing, his breath pluming into pale clouds in the darkness. He reached for his phone to turn on the flashlight, but the screen flickered violently and died. That was when he noticed it, or rather, the lack of it. The rain outside had stopped, but so had everything else. There was no wind rustling the trees, no nocturnal insects buzzing, no distant hum of traffic. The silence was absolute, deafening, and terrifying. It felt as though the entire universe had held its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. He sat up in bed, every muscle in his body tense. From the hallway outside his bedroom door, a sound broke the stillness. It wasn't a footstep, nor was it the settling of the old house. It was the distinct, rhythmic sound of a pendulum swinging. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound was agonizingly slow, drawn out as if time itself was being dragged through mud. Liam felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. He knew for a fact that none of the clocks downstairs were wound. Suddenly, the ticking stopped. The pendulum came to a dead halt right in the center. The entity froze. Slowly, with agonizing deliberation, it began to turn around. Liam watched in sheer horror as the thing twisted its torso first, its bones cracking loudly in the dead quiet, a sound like dry branches snapping underfoot. Then it turned its head. It had no eyes, no nose, no hair. Where its face should have been, there was only a smooth, pale expanse of skin, except for a wide, jagged slit where a mouth should be. The slit opened, stretching impossibly wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp blackened teeth. It didn't make a sound. It didn't roar or hiss. Instead, it raised a single long skeletal finger with a jagged black nail and pressed it against its lipless mouth. It was a universal gesture. Shh. The realization hit Liam like a physical blow. The silence wasn't just a condition of the house. It was a rule. It was a demand. The morning light did little to dispel the terror of the night before. Gray, sickly sunshine filtered through the dusty windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the bedroom floor. Liam hadn't slept a wink. His eyes were red-shot and his muscles ached from holding his breath for hours. When the grandfather clock downstairs struck 8, the sound didn't ring out with a clear chime. It was a dull, muffled thud, like a heartbeat underwater. He cautiously unlocked the door and stepped out into the hallway. The towering clock and the faceless entity were gone, leaving behind only a faint, bitter scent of ozone and rotting wood. Liam's first instinct was to flee. He grabbed his car keys and rushed downstairs, not even bothering to pack his suitcase. He just wanted to get away from the suffocating quiet of the Miller estate. He threw open the heavy front door, sprinting toward his sedan parked in the driveway. He jumped into the driver's seat, jammed the key into the ignition, and turned it. Nothing. The engine didn't even sputter. He tried again and again, pumping the gas pedal, but the car remained dead. He grabbed his phone to call a tow truck, but the screen remained black, completely unresponsive despite being plugged into the car charger. Frustrated and panicked, Liam decided to walk to the nearest town, which was about 5 miles down the isolated road. He stepped out of the car and began to walk briskly. However, after walking for what felt like an hour, he noticed something impossible. The scenery wasn't changing. The same twisted oak tree, the same moss-covered stone wall, and the same dense fog remained alongside him. No matter how fast he walked or ran, the Miller estate remained visible just a few hundred yards behind him, as if the road itself was looping back. The house was a trap. Liam froze, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. He slowly tilted his head downward, peering into the dark cavity beneath the desk. 2 hollow, dark recesses, where eyes should have been, stared back at him from the shadows. The conductor was crouching under the desk, its long, spindly limbs folded intricately like a spider's. It was waiting for him to make a sound. Liam instinctively opened his mouth to gasp, but remembered his uncle's warning just in time. He clamped his hand over his mouth, squeezing his eyes shut, forcing his breathing to slow down. The entity slowly crawled out from under the desk. It didn't make a single sound as its elongated limbs touched the floorboards. It rose to its full, towering height, hovering over Liam. The terrifying, featureless face bent down until it was mere inches away from Liam. Liam could smell the sickening odor of decay radiating from it. The entity's jagged, black-toothed mouth opened wide, mimicking a silent scream. It was trying to provoke him, trying to scare a sound out of him. Tears of pure terror streamed down Liam's cheeks, but he kept his hand firmly sealed over his mouth, refusing to let even a whimper escape. For 3 agonizing minutes, the entity stared into Liam's soul. Finally, apparently unsatisfied by his complete silence, the conductor stepped back. It raised its long skeletal finger to its mouth again, delivering its silent command. By the dawn of the 5th day, the line between reality and nightmare had completely blurred. Liam looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. His cheeks were sunken, his skin was a sickly, translucent pale, and dark purple bruises of exhaustion ringed his bloodshot eyes. He hadn't spoken a single word, hadn't whispered, hadn't even let out a sigh for over 96 hours. The silence had become a physical weight that sat heavily on his chest, making every breath a chore. The house had grown even more hostile. The auditory hallucinations were no longer just faint whispers. They had turned into a chaotic symphony of overlapping voices, screams, and weeping that echoed inside his skull, loud enough to make his ears ring. Yet the house around him remained deathly, terrifyingly still. The rules of the entity, the conductor, were becoming more sadistic. On this day, Liam discovered that the entity was no longer waiting for the darkness of night to hunt him. While searching the kitchen for any canned food that hadn't mysteriously rotted, Liam dropped the rusted can opener. The small metal object hit the linoleum floor with a sharp, echoing clack. The sound felt like a gunshot in the dead quiet of the estate. Instantly, the temperature in the kitchen plummeted to below freezing. The air turned so cold that the water in the sink froze into solid ice within seconds. Liam didn't hesitate. He scrambled under the heavy wooden kitchen table, pulling his knees to his chest. A second later, the pantry door flew open with such force that it ripped off its hinges, crashing into the wall without making a single sound. A terrifying manifestation of the house's cursed physics. Liam collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air silently, tears of sheer survival pouring down his face. He realized he couldn't just keep hiding. The entity was getting hungrier and bolder. He needed a weapon, or at least a clue on how his Uncle Arthur had managed to survive as long as he did. Remembering the chaotic study, Liam crept back into the room, moving with the agonizing slowness of a mime. He began to carefully sift through the loose papers on the desk, making sure not to rustle them too loudly. Deep within a hidden drawer of the desk, Liam found a small, old iron key wrapped in a piece of parchment. On the parchment, his uncle had scrawled a final desperate message. "The root of the curse lies in the cellar, the anchor of the silence. Destroy the anchor, break the cycle. But beware, it will do anything to protect the source." Liam looked at the key. The cellar. He had avoided that door since he arrived. It was located at the end of the darkest corridor on the ground floor, sealed with the iron key turned in the lock with a heavy scraping sound that Liam felt in his teeth rather than heard. As the cellar door swung open, a gust of air so foul and bitterly cold rushed out that it nearly knocked him backward. It smelled of dried blood, rusted iron, and centuries of stagnation. Liam gripped his dimming flashlight, its beam flickering weakly against the pitch-black staircase that descended into the bowels of the estate. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but the chaotic voices in his head and the knowledge that he wouldn't survive another night of torment pushed him forward. He stepped onto the wooden stairs, each step groaning softly under his weight, echoing into the vast, unseen emptiness below. The cellar was vast, much larger than the house above it. The walls weren't made of timber or brick, but of rough, damp stone that seemed to sweat black condensation. As Liam reached the bottom, his flashlight beam swept across the room and caught something that made his blood run cold. Dozens of humanoid figures stood perfectly still in the darkness. Liam scrambled backward, freezing in terror, expecting them to lunge. But they didn't move. Moving closer, he realized they weren't monsters, they were statues, or rather, the calcified remains of previous victims. Their faces were frozen in expressions of absolute, unimaginable horror, their mouths locked open in wide, silent screams. They had broken the rule of silence, and this cellar was their eternal graveyard. In the center of this horrific gallery stood a Suddenly, the entities rushed forward. They didn't strike to kill, they struck to make him scream. One of the smaller shadows lunged, its jagged claws tearing through the fabric of Liam's jacket and slicing into his shoulder. The pain was immediate and white-hot. Liam gasped, his mouth flying open as a wave of agony hit him. He desperately wanted to shriek, to yell for help, to let out the scream that was building up in his chest. But through the haze of pain, he saw the calcified statues around him. He saw their open mouths. He knew that the moment a single sound left his lips, his soul would be ripped from his flesh, and he would become just another stone monument in this basement. With a superhuman effort of will, Liam clamped his teeth shut so hard that his gums bled. He swallowed the scream, turning it into a silent, choking wheeze. He swung the crowbar wildly in the dark, striking the shadow entity and causing it to dissipate into a cloud of black mist. But another one grabbed his leg, pulling him to the cold stone floor. His head hit the ground with a dull thud. The conductor glided over him, its featureless face inches from his. It began to manipulate the air, forcing Liam's own mind to play the ultimate trick. Inside Liam's head, the sound of a deafening explosion roared, followed by the agonizing screams of his family. The iron crowbar collided with the pulsing stone heart with a force that vibrated through Liam's entire skeleton. For a fraction of a second, time seemed to stop entirely, the conductor's jagged claws frozen inches from Liam's throat. Then, a sharp spiderweb crack appeared on the surface of the anchor, glowing with a sickly, ethereal blue light. The petrified heart gave one final violent spasm before shattering into 1,000 pieces of dull, lifeless stone. The reaction was instantaneous and cataclysmic. A shockwave of pure energy erupted from the broken altar. It didn't make a sound, but the sheer force of it blew the shadow entities backward, dissolving them into thin air like smoke in a gale. The conductor let out what should have been a deafening shriek of agony. Its mouth opened wider and wider, its unearthly body twisting and warping as the blue light from the shattered anchor poured out of its featureless face and hollow chest. The entity began to collapse in on itself, its ancient, malevolent existence ripping apart at the seams. Liam was thrown off the altar, crashing hard onto the stone floor. As he painfully dragged himself to his feet, using the altar for support. Looking around the cellar, he saw the calcified statues of the previous victims. The blue light from the shattered anchor was washing over them. As he watched, the stone skin of the statues began to crack and crumble away into dust, freeing the souls that had been trapped in that horrific stillness for decades. They faded away into the darkness, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. Liam slowly climbed the cellar stairs, his body aching from his injuries, but his spirit lighter than it had been since he set foot on Blackwood Lane. He stepped out of the house into the cool morning rain. The sickly gray fog had lifted, revealing a bright, rising sun that painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. He walked over to his car, inserted the key, and turned it. The engine roared to life instantly, a beautiful mechanical noise that signaled his freedom. His phone, sitting on the passenger seat,